As we head into 2026, it feels like everybody is talking about ADHD. Podcasts, TikToks, Instagram Reels. But if you're anything like me, you probably grew up with some misconceptions about ADHD, that it was just for hyperactive kids who couldn't sit still. There's been a lot of stigma around it. Well, that's kind of what I thought too until I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Here's what I know now. ADHD is very, very real. And when it goes undiagnosed, it can quietly wreck your life. Relationships, career, finances, self worth. The list goes on and on. So, in this video, we're going to talk about a few things, some painful things, but also some very hopeful things. What ADHD actually is in adults, how to tell if an adult might have it, why so many people go decades without ever knowing they have ADHD, whether ADHD is actually increasing, and then my own personal POV on ADHD and maybe some more of the hopeful stuff. A quick disclaimer before I get into it. I'm not a doctor or a clinician. This is not medical advice whatsoever. It's just my experience combined with some of the research I've done and a little bit of coaching. All right, let's get into it. What even is ADHD? Well, the acronym stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. That can be a little bit of a misleading name. Hyperactivity kind of implies that I can't sit still. People often think that ADHD means I can't pay attention. Neither of those are actually true. I talked about the misconceptions before. I've had a lot of them myself, but what I've learned, ADHD actually means that I really can't control what I pay attention to. I have difficulty controlling my focus, but sometimes I focus too much, and that's called hyperfocus. The real issue is that we have difficulty regulating our attention on command. You may have heard the term ADD. ADD is an old term. It's attention deficit disorder. That was the term that was used until the 90s when they changed it to ADHD. I'm not going to talk about whether that was a good change or a bad change, but the three common presentations of ADHD are inattentive, hyperactive, and combined. Most adults who go undiagnosed for many years are of the inattentive type. That was definitely my case. I could be lost in space, not able to focus, but I was super smart and I got the work done eventually, so nobody really noticed. We're not bouncing off the walls. We're not hyperactive. We're just mentally oftentimes somewhere else. Where does ADHD even begin? And can you get it as an adult? No. ADHD is not like the flu. You don't just catch ADHD. It starts in childhood. In fact, that's one of the criteria for diagnosing ADHD on the DSM-5. The symptoms that you experience, whether it's inattentive or hyperactive, they have to have existed since you were a child, and they'll actually ask you that. So it starts in childhood, but it doesn't just go away at 18 either. It doesn't just go away at 20 or 25. You don't just grow out of ADHD. Research shows that most kids, probably in the order of 90 to 95% of kids with ADHD, will continue to have ADHD as adults. When you learn that you have ADHD as an adult, and you've lived for many decades, in my case, 4 decades without even knowing, it's not just that you're like, oh yeah, cool, join the club. I feel scattered too. No, you feel a deep sense of shame. You can feel overwhelmed. You feel like your identity is inconsistent, or that you're never on time. You're always late. You're always behind on life. That can create an internal dialogue that's really destructive because the message playing in your brain is, everyone else can handle this. What the hell's wrong with me? If you experience any of this, nothing's wrong with you. You just weren't born working with the brain that everybody else has. And the systems and structures and infrastructure that was designed for the modern workplace or modern relationships doesn't quite match your wiring. All right, so back to the question at hand. How can you tell if an adult has ADHD? Some of the common signs. 1, chronic procrastination. We procrastinate as ADHDers not because we don't care, but because the task feels overwhelming. Number 2 is time blindness. We have no idea how long something takes. Time for ADHDers is often just very binary. It's either now or not now. So if something is urgent, we can do it. And it doesn't matter how long it'll take, we'll just get it done. But if something's not urgent, aka not now, well, that could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be never. Number 3 is task paralysis. When I want to start something, I can't even start the first step. I feel a sense of deep anxiety, like there's a cinder block on my chest. 4, we work best oftentimes under pressure. If it's now, if it's urgent, I can do it. I can initiate it. And I'm going to blaze through it without taking a break. That's where my hyper focus kicks in and I can get it done. Because see, urgency releases dopamine. Number 5 is forgetfulness. With ADHD, even if we know something backward and forward, or if we've reviewed our calendar the day before, or if we know, hey, the kid's got a soccer game, I got to pick him up at 4 o'clock today. These are things we care deeply about, but we often just forget them because we have issues with working memory. All right, number 6, we start strong, but we finish with fumes. We finish on empty. You find yourself working way harder, spinning way more cycles on easy stuff than you feel like you should. 7 is a big one. Physical and digital clutter. People with ADHD oftentimes have real difficulty managing and organizing their physical and digital space. Number 8 is hyperfocus. When we care about something, like I said, care about something deeply, or maybe it's just a new hobby that we're like, oh wow, I'm gonna take up beer making or something, right? Hours can disappear, and you can deep dive on the subject, researching, and then starting to make beer, right, for weeks on end. So those are some of the symptoms and common patterns of behavior that we see with people with ADHD. I just named 8 of them that I am absolutely susceptible to, even still after a few years of treatment for ADHD. What are the outcomes? What are the outcomes that leads to in life? Well, a lot of the outcomes are actually fairly negative because, again, the world, the systems, the infrastructure is not designed for people with our wiring. So people with ADHD often switch jobs more frequently. We find ourselves overcommitted because we see possibility everywhere. We feel guilty for not living up to our full potential. And we feel like we're just disorganized and a wreck. We know that our brains were organized differently, but we just don't know what to do about it. Like I said, ADHD can't develop in adulthood. It may present differently in adulthood, but if you have it now, you had ADHD as a child. You most likely just masked it. At least that was the case for me. Years and years and years of getting really good at hiding what was really causing a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of struggle, a lot of stress. So masking is one of the reasons that ADHD goes undiagnosed so often. We learn to compensate for our failure, for our lateness, for everything that I mentioned, all the symptoms of ADHD that just kind of lead to chaos. We try to present an air of, I got it all together. Even from 7 years old, I was doing this with charm, with intelligence, with hard work, with people pleasing, with perfectionism. But guys, the reality is that ADHD masking or masking of any type leads to exhaustion, burnout, and shame. The second reason I think ADHD goes undiagnosed so often is high IQ. Many adults with ADHD, they actually test in the top 10 to 20% of the IQ range. So it's not an intellectual deficiency. Their bosses and their teachers growing up may think, you're smart, but you just need to apply yourself more. For those of us with ADHD, that translates into a lifetime message of, you're pretty talented, but you should be doing better. You're smarter than this. Our perfectionism, number 3. When your effort is unreliable, you try to make everything perfect just to avoid failure. So what actually causes ADHD? A lot of people believe a couple more misconceptions, that ADHD is caused by screen time or sugar or bad parenting. But actually, none of those are true. The reality is that ADHD is neurological and genetic. So they actually call it a neurogenetic disorder. Brain scans have shown a lot of differences in executive function, working memory, the motivation pathways, dopamine regulation, and they've also shown genetic connections. That some of this stuff is wired into our genes, into our chromosomes. You don't develop ADHD later as a trauma response or as, just a response to modern life. Although what we discover is that a lot of these can be exacerbating factors. Obviously, trauma is not good for ADHD people. Sleep deprivation, not good for ADHD people. Chronic stress, again, not good for ADHDers. Hormonal changes can have big impacts on your ADHD. And there can be a feedback loop where your ADHD naturally has an impact on all of those factors. So again, it can be a pretty vicious cycle if left undiagnosed, untreated, potentially unmedicated. Last question I wanted to get into was, is ADHD becoming more common in 2025? Short answer, no, I don't think so. Rates of ADHD are definitely going up. But I think what's happening a lot more, at least in my case, okay, so I'm going to get off my soapbox here and just let you know, I'm speaking in my case. I always had ADHD. I think a lot of people have always had ADHD. And now that we have more information, more awareness, we have less of a stigma, a lot more adults are getting evaluated. We understand that ADHD is beyond hyperactivity now. Social media has given people words to express experiences that they never understood before. There's community, there's a lot more awareness. So again, ADHD didn't suddenly increase, I don't think. Identification increased. People are finally saying, wow, I'm not broken. There's a name for this. And there's a community. For years, decades, I believed that all of my struggles disqualified me. And this story kept playing over and over in my head, that my failures proved that I was never enough. There's something God has shown me since my ADHD diagnosis, is that He doesn't wait for us to be perfect, perfectly organized, or perfectly consistent. He meets us in that struggle. Looking back in every season where I felt lost or ashamed, I knew God was there. He wasn't going to be there once I fixed myself, and once I became productive enough, once I had checked off enough boxes, once my resume was great. He was there every single step and misstep of the way. And if you're watching this today, you feel any of that, I want you to hear this. You're not broken. You didn't make a mistake. You were created intentionally by a creator who loves you, and He gave you a mission. Your story's not over. I'll be sharing more of mine, including more raw vlog-style content about what we've walked through, how God has been faithful every step and every chapter of the way. So go ahead and hit subscribe, hit the bell. If you're new here, I'd love to see you back in the next one. God bless you.